Hello, my name is Jonathan Harris from Worldwide Camera Exchange. Voigtlander cameras, the modern Voigtlander cameras made by Casino in Japan, really nicely made, really reliable rangefinder film-based cameras. If you're looking for a lower cost Leica alternative, these are certainly worth considering. I'm going to now run through the basic layout of the camera and just give you a very quick guided tour. The first thing to say is there have been a number of models. Fundamentally, they're very, very similar. Some have automatic shutters, some don't. The metering in the viewfinder varies from model to model. The lens mount itself also varies. Some were available in Leica screw fitting, some were available in the bayonet M fitting, and there were also some made in Contax and Nikon fitting. So there are lots of variants on this camera, but the layout is fundamentally the same. Starting at the top, you've got shutter speed dial there. It's a mechanical shutter starting at 1,000th, going through to a 2,000th, starting at a second and going around to a 2,000th of a second. ASA dial you'll see is just the little window there. Obviously you only get the ASA dial if you've got inbuilt metering. Some have metering, some don't. Wind on crank here, very, very traditional setup. Shutter release on the front there. Just to the left of the accessory shoe there, you have the frame selector, so you can dial in whichever lens you're using, and the correct frame will appear in the viewfinder. So, for example, using a 35mm frame, it'll bring in a 35mm bright line frame. If you're using a 28mm lens, it'll bring in a 28mm frame, and so on. With the very wide lenses, now this is a 21mm lens, you would actually have an auxiliary viewfinder as well. Just here you have the film rewind, again, a very, very traditional setup. Look at the front of the camera, you've got the lens release here. Now with the bayonet lenses, you have the lens release here. With the screw lens, they just unscrew, push that in, the lens just bayonets off, and inside there you can see the shutter and the little rangefinder coupling cam, which couples to the focusing mechanism on the lens. Looking at the bottom, you've got the battery chamber. That's obviously for the meter. The shutter itself is mechanical. It takes two 10L14 batteries. And over here, you've got the coupling for the motor drive. Again, not all these cameras have that. And just on the bottom there is the button you press in to release the film. Film loading, very, very straightforward, very traditional. Pop the cassette in there, pull the leader through, close the back, wind on a couple of times, and away you go. Now, if you're buying one of these things, really three things you should check. You need to check the cosmetics, you need to check mechanics and electronics, if it has electronics, and you just need to check the optics. I'll just quickly run through those now. I mean, the cosmetics, fairly obvious. Just make sure it hasn't been knocked, hasn't been dropped, hasn't been abused. Have a look on the corners, have a look on the top of the rangefinder here, have a look on the base, make sure that's clean. Satisfy yourself it hasn't had a hard life. If it's in nice condition, absolutely fantastic. If it looks as though it's had a bit of use, not an issue. If you see dents in the corners, frankly, I'd walk away. So once you're happy it's in nice condition, then just have a look at the mechanics and the optics. Now with these mechanical cameras, they're really quite straightforward to check. Take the lens off, set the lens on the shutter rather on 1 second down here, and just open the back. And just look through. Just fire the shutter and make sure you can see the shutter opening and closing properly. It's not stuttering, it's not sticking, it's opening and closing as it should be. And the shutter, as it opens, does clear the film gate completely. If you just wind on to, just turn it around to half a second, check on half a second, check on a quarter of a second, check on 1/8 of a second. You can hear the tone changing each time. You can see the shutters getting faster. You're not actually checking the speed here. What you're doing is making sure it is changing, and you're making sure on each speed it is consistent. Take it up to the top speed, On this particular camera, it's a 2000th. Just hold it up to a bright light and look through a bright light, at a bright light source rather, and just make sure you can see light at all points through the film gate. So you want to make sure that the shutter is clearing the film gate. If you only see light at the top and not at the bottom, that would suggest that the shutter is closing prematurely. So that's a problem. The camera would need to be serviced. But if you can just run through those checks with the shutter, and if you can see there are no issues, then you can be fairly sure the shutter's gonna be healthy. Have a quick look then at the rangefinder. Just look through the camera and just very carefully push this little wheel here backwards and forwards. Don't stick your finger through the shutter, that won't do it any good at all. Just very gently, just push the wheel there. You should be able to see the rangefinder mechanism coming across and the two images coinciding. Just make sure they do, and just make sure that they align vertically. And if you're outside focusing at infinity, make sure they align horizontally. Often with these rangefinder cameras, you can see the two images, one above the other, and that's the problem. That shows it needs to be adjusted. So check out that. If it's got a meter, just stick a lens on it and just make sure the meter is reading as it should be. Compare it to a handheld meter, or compare it to another SLR, and just make sure it's roughly the same. It would usually be within a stop or so. Don't expect them to be bang on, because no 2 meters will ever read exactly the same. Once you've done that, then have a look at the glass. Just have a very careful look at the rangefinder. Look into the rangefinder window from both sides, and just make sure that there's no misting, there's no fungus. I'll stick a link up above, just explain what fungus is, but just make sure it's nice and clean in there. Finally, if you can, obviously, just stick a test film through. Just try it on the slow speeds, try it on the high speeds. Just make sure the metering is accurate. But if you are running a test film through it, do check the other checks I've mentioned as well, because a film may not show an issue with fungus in the viewfinder. A film may not show issues with misalignment on the focusing, even though it does focus accurately. So do run through the checks I've just outlined as well as running a film through. But once you've done that, once you've done those checks, once you've run a film through, if you're happy with the results, then you can be sure you'll have a good, reliable camera. With the lens, if you're looking at a lens, make sure the focusing is smooth, make sure the aperture moves smoothly, and just make sure it shuts down as it should. Off the camera, open the aperture up, look through at a bright source of light, and look through from the front and the back, and just make sure there are no scratches, no misting, and again, as I mentioned with the viewfinder, no fungus, and check out the video on fungus. A few very light surface marks on the front or the back won't affect performance, but they will affect resale. So if you see marks actually on the glass, on the lens, or the viewfinder for that matter, not necessarily an issue, but the price you're paying should reflect the fact those marks are there. I hope that's useful. If you have any questions, please stick them in the box below. Otherwise, please like and subscribe, and I hope to see you again soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.